Hi, my name is Paul Sargent. Welcome once again to AP Euro Bit by Bit, the series in which I'm trying to break down modern European history into small bite-sized pieces so that you can better understand it. Well, in the last episode, I obviously bit off more than I could chew and couldn't complete all of La Belle Epoque in anything resembling a usable time format. So here's part 2 of La Belle Epoque. Enjoy. Meanwhile, science is challenging some of the long-held beliefs of the Newtonian system of science and starting to emphasize that things don't work quite as well as Newton thought. Foremost among these is Albert Einstein, who proves that with the theory of relativity, that time itself is relative and that it doesn't follow the Newtonian physics that we had always, at that point, believed in. They're also backed up by the discoveries of Pierre and Marie Curie and the ideas of Max Planck, who shows that radiation moves in irregular patterns which cannot be predicted using Newtonian science. In another realm, psychology, there's also this feeling that the rational being isn't necessarily what we thought it was during the Enlightenment. In fact, the ideas of Freud are that the irrational is oftentimes more important in understanding individual behavior than the rational. People don't always do rational things. Sometimes we're driven, and often we're driven by things that we can't control. Now, he divided this into 3 areas: the id, the ego, and the superego, which have largely been disproven since his time by most psychologists. But the central idea behind all of this is that there are forces at work inside of us that force us to work in non-rational ways, which can account for a lot of human behavior. Some intellectuals even abandon the idea of human progress, which has really driven European society since the Renaissance. This idea that through constant improvement we can reach a perfect society. And Friedrich Nietzsche, for example, puts forth the idea that we're not capable of that some people are born superior than others, and those supermen should be given control of society because they're able to make the decisions that are best for all of us. And there is no sort of perfect movement towards greatness. And there is maybe no God, which is becoming more and more of a thing. Science and religion are consistently at odds, and so they do a very curious thing. They adopt what's called agnosticism, which really means I don't know about God, and frees them up to go ahead and go about science without having to worry about addressing the is there a God or is there not a God issue. In the artistic realm, we have a movement away from realistic depictions of the world with the development of the camera, especially as the camera becomes more of a consumer item. Artists find the need to paint stuff that, is really there less and less important because people can just take pictures. So you see the rise of movements like Impressionism, Post-Impressionism, Cubism, and even abstract art, in which art is all about the way that the artist interprets reality and not so much about depicting reality. And this is the point at which many people start to turn away from art as a less understandable and less appreciable thing. I myself have to admit that I have a hard time teaching art movements after this, simply because it becomes beyond my ability to really talk about. The Impressionists try to capture a moment on the canvas of lighting, and they show how lighting can change the way things look over periods of time. The Post-Impressionists try to get away from this and get rid of scale and perspective and things like that. And then the abstract artists kind of toss it all out the window and say, I'm going to make something that's going to show how I feel about things, and you try to interpret it, which is really a lot of what abstract art is. And finally, politics. Politics reacts to all of these changes in a number of different ways. Number one, you have governments that increasingly appeal to the people, especially in Western Europe, where more and more people are given the vote and thus have a say and thus have influence on what the government does. It also causes these governments, because of the expansion of production capabilities and things like that, to go out and seek new colonies in Africa and Asia. And we enter the period of the new imperialism, in which Europeans are extraordinarily successful in taking over these areas of the world for the most part. Taking over doesn't really apply to China, but there are problems. This creates a whole series of benefits, and it creates a whole series of problems. And when I get to imperialism, we'll get into that. And it also creates a rivalry between all of these European powers, which Otto von Bismarck tries to hold off through diplomacy throughout his tenure as Chancellor of Germany, until he's fired in 1891, and Kaiser Wilhelm II, who is not quite as capable as he'd like to be, tries to take things on himself, ends up alienating France, Russia, and Great Britain, which creates two large alliances which are allied against each other. And that doesn't usually work out well, and won't in this case either. So talk about big picture. That's the big picture of the whole area of La Belle Epoque. It doesn't cover all of the things that you need to know, but at least you have a big idea of what this is all about. Generally speaking, this is a time of optimism. This is a time when people start to believe that they're on the cusp of the perfect society, when standards of living are going up, and happiness and leisure and family and all of this is really being emphasized, at least in the upper and middle classes, and increasingly in the lower classes too. It's all going to be shattered in 1914, when the destructive power of an industrial economy and the nationalism being pushed in these countries are going to result in a war which is going to shatter all of the European belief in progress. So that's it for this episode of AP Euro Bit by Bit. I hope you've learned something, and I hope you stay tuned. Be sure to subscribe to my channel so that you can be notified whenever I post new videos. Spread the word. Go to the mountaintop. Tell people about this channel. Tell them to subscribe and watch these videos. They might help. And hey, we're not all that far away from the AP exam, so review. Look back at some of my old videos and see how they do. More than anything else, I hope these things are helping. So my name's Paul Sargent. This is AP Euro Bit by Bit. Thanks for watching.